Since I created the top, if I can't find it. And now, the news. On the quiz show Dumb, who would be the winner? That is, who would be the dumbest? The person who thinks that they're dumb, the person who thinks that they're intelligent, the person who thinks that they're intelligent and other people are dumb, or the host. For being a party to it all. Daddy, are they still reading news about the mind and they've just changed the terms?
No.
Son, I believe that based on that, I'll buy a vowel. Gee, that's great, Dad. Here's a U. Har, har. And here's a U2 to you, son. And with that, the bartender told them both to get the hell out of his mind. One guy's latest view of the whole affair, quoting, "Living the life of a thoughtful human on this planet is like being on the beach and someone has wandered off and left a radio playing next to where you're laying." A reporter visited a mystic and said, "I understand that you won't do interviews." To which he replied, "More precisely is that I can't do interviews." And the reporter said, "Wait, if we're trying to be really precise, then shouldn't it be that you won't do interviews because you clearly could?" And the mystic replied, "No, you do not understand. The reality of it, most precisely put, is that I cannot do interviews. For no one awake can without putting their state in jeopardy." To understand what the enlightened think of as a metaphor, you must take anything you hear regarding two or more people as having occurred in the mind of one. A speaker declared, "That unique inner world, available only to man, depends entirely on thought." And someone in the audience muttered aloud, "So, that's what they're calling bullshit nowadays, there." There was once a man who had two homes, both of which offered their own joys. But he, for some unknown reason, began to wonder if there was not some place, somewhere, just in between the two, where he might reside more comfortably. Until you realize that all thought is only about words, and hence all talk is solely about itself, words will forever confuse, if not bedevil you. Just as alcohol is of importance only to those who drink, so too is thought of significance only to the ignorant. A man said, "Once I was imprisoned, but now I am free." And someone asked where he had been imprisoned, and he replied, "Oh, I was not actually imprisoned. I just thought I was. Then I got over it. And that was my freedom." To be asleep is to expect tomorrow to be better, or at least different. And yeah, you're right. Ordinary minds apply this same definition to an entirely different concept. Headline, "Here's the big doctor's only prescription. There are no medicines, only poisons. Live with this fact and save yourself a heap of trouble." By the way, I happen to know this particular man is not licensed to practice medicine in any solar system you've ever heard of. Just more of us here at the station trying to be of service to you, to whatever you are. First man says to second man, Are you the one I heard who suddenly developed the ability to know what's going on in people's minds? Yes, I am, he replied. And the first man says, well, I just wanted to stop by and express my condolences. A citizen walks up to a bunch of cops standing around together and says, okay, what's the problem here? Or, as memory said to association, if bunches ain't the problem, collections are. On one planet, their motto is, if knowledge is rated, it's overrated. And then one man changed his name to Reaper in the attempt to bring himself closer to the actual location where the separation of wheat and chaff takes place. A man verbally engaged a mystic thusly. I hear it said that there is a limit to language, to which the wise one grunted his agreement, and the man continued, but could you tell me when this limit is reached? And the mystic replied, when you have said the first word. There are bursts of noise, then moments of silence. Bricks and mortar. Wide open spaces, then bunches of stuff. Are you catching the pattern? Yeah, you mind. I'm talking to you. Since life is not packaged into predictable bundles, thought makes up for this deficiency. In his will, one father bequeathed to his son but this piece of advice: never answer the door. The boy had the wherewithal to realize that this was direction intended for his mind. And never mind that he'd been hoping for the old man's Mercedes. Definition time. New knowledge. The repositioning of yourself on an imaginary merry-go-round. Believing that things thought about provide the reasons for them being thought about is the same as believing that looking at the sun will reveal the cause of day and night. Question: if you entered a race, imagining the prize to be a solid gold sword, and upon finishing found that you received not the imagined gold sword, but a real steel shovel, would you be disappointed? One man was ultimately surprised to finally find that, except in his mind, he didn't dislike anybody, wasn't critical of anything, didn't want anything in particular, and just all in all didn't really have much of anything to say about being alive. A certain man with certain experiences had this to note: what is enlightenment but being free of your attitude? Everyone believes they live by a river. They're mistaken. They live by an ocean. In other words, thoughts don't actually run anywhere. They just bob up and down forever and ever and ever and ever. To be enlightened is to not know whether you exercise free will by living your life, or whether by living your life you produce free will. And not caring. Above all, and not caring. Papa, asked a lad, are there, as legends have it, marks, signs, and extraordinary stigmas by which men more conscious may be recognized? Indeed so, his father replied. And what might they be, the boy further inquired, to which his pater replied, most distinct is their lack of concern. About what, asked the lad. Just lack of concern, replied the dad. There is hip and there is non-hip, and then there is super hip, which occurs when the hip and the non-hip cannot determine whether or not something is hip or not hip. Myth tells of a road to another world by which was a sign that said, if you're worried about it, it is not life that you're living. The reality in which men's thoughts tell them they live is forever impossibly disjointed, irrationally selective, and uselessly limited. A world that is seen solely through whatever words the mind has available to describe it. One man announced 2 pieces of advice. One, old and worn out. The other, new and worn out. Don't be too quick to judge. Don't be too quick to judge anything. Okay, so I'm old and worn out. So what? End quote. Here's the way one man put it to himself. Okay, look, here's the deal. I'm either thinking of thought or thought is thinking for me. Hey, is that a deal or what? And upon hearing me say that, the man we were just talking about said, cute, real cute. A man inquired of himself, when am I at my most ridiculous? And replied to himself, when I am believing that I truly do not know what to do. Headline: the final word regarding all forms of judgment, discernment, and criticism. Nothing you think about anything is correct. One man's motto, well, that was it. I'm afraid you were waiting. One man's motto is, lay under a tree that no one wants. Headline: concerning a certain non-public construction project. A mystic must use whatever works for the moment, but never get attached to it. A father said to a son, although they may strike you as being 2 different things altogether, and while others may not understand your position, you will do yourself great potential good by considering that words and thoughts are the exact same thing. Compared to the physical life we actually live, the mental one we imagine we do is like an unfinished impressionistic painting done by a drowsy parochial myopic who is colorblind. Headline: an important fact, hard to keep in mind. I wonder why. The business of the mind is to think, not to think about what it's thinking. And now this from our Department of Major Breakthroughs. Maybe. After years of struggling absolutely to the contrary, one man has presently concluded that it's probably okay to go ahead and be as asleep as you've always been, as long as you pay attention to what you're doing. After the king had just been presented with a totally unexpected situation, his prime minister said to him, well, I guess this gives you something to think about. And to himself the monarch said, but if I was truly as wise as I am believed to be, then nothing would give me something to think about. One man began to think of the experience that others have called waking up and being enlightened as, I did it. A bit further down the line, he started to wonder if it should be, it did me. There was once a man who secretly placed listening devices in the homes of both his enemies and those whom he admired, so that he could learn their most personal thinking through hearing their most private talk. But he eventually began to worry that they knew of his deception and that everything they said in conversation and to themselves aloud was done solely to confuse and mislead him, and they were never in any way sincere. You're not going to lure us both to the squalid position of having me add a moral or concluding commentary to this story, are you? If the realization that you cannot think, period, outside the use of words, and hence all thought is about words and nothing else, was unbrokenly held long enough, it would surely scare the last vestiges of sleep out of the weariest of you. Once on a national holiday, a father gave his son this festive advice: always treat the words of others that annoy you as though they said them just to annoy you. And with that, he stuck a lit rocket, in the kid's pocket, adding, "You'll never go wrong." If the awakened mind were to perceive a demon, its name would be gravity. On a note, one man wrote, "If all thought is bullshit, then is not all talk but the attempt to camouflage bullshit?" Man walks up to the customer service counter and says, "I want to return this." And the clerk on duty replies, "Don't we all?" As he lay peacefully on his life bed, a father looked up to his son and said, "Still, the best advice I can give you is, get out more often." Of people who casually see this program, the most common comment is, very common, is some prelude display of approval. "Hey, watch your show." Always followed by, "What's it about?" An easy answer, perhaps with too much of an edge, would be, it's about 60 minutes, or in some cities they cut into 2 30-minute shows. A little bit better would be when they say, "What's it about?" for me to say, "Well, it's actually about nothing, but I understand some network sitcom has already acquisitioned that description for their efforts." So, when they say, "Well, what's it?" I watch it. I always nod like, "Yeah, I enjoy it. Every time I see you, I turn it on, but tell me the truth, what's it about?" Perhaps a closer answer would actually be that it is about the thing that a few people want to know about so that they would get over thinking that life's about anything. Good night. Be sure and mistreat each other. What is it people want out of life? Besides just this program, forget just somebody watching this program and saying, "I watch it, and it's interesting," or "I enjoyed, hello, what's it about?" And at first you can think, well, that's a bit, no offense to anybody, but take away the idea nowadays people love celebrity so much, or just anybody will pass for a celebrity. I mean, they can see somebody over by the kumquats in the produce department at Safeway that they've seen their face on a wanted poster nowadays, and they'll go over and ask for their autograph before turning them in. So discounting that, though, what is it? Why would somebody watch this and then say, "What's it about?" All right, we've done enough of that. Why do people do anything in life? They don't follow it up this way, but here's what they should be doing: is every time somebody goes to vote, every time somebody turns on television, somebody goes to a synagogue or a church, or they should be asking themselves, even if they get there and somebody next to them turns and nods like, "Isn't this something?" and they nod along like, "Oh yeah," they should ask themselves, "What's this about?" See, the way the mind works, if you don't watch it, it would be someone asking you, if you just made a speech and saying, what was that about? And your inclination is to answer. Or the way I was describing it, people approaching me, I was trying to take me out of it because this is my night to be humble. But the question should be, is why are they watching it? They should not ask somebody else, what is it about? They should be asking, what am I about to be watching it? And I don't mean just this, is what I was trying to get you to see, someone sitting in church. They shouldn't turn around. Let's say you went to a church, some religious organization to which you'd never been exposed before. And you went there and it was strange, and et cetera. And you turned to the person next to you that seemed to know what was going on, or even the person in charge after the service. And you went, that was enjoyable, impressive, but what was it about? And the way the human mind works, the way talk operates, being simply a grooming between people, you never notice it. You will give interviews, regardless of what the man tonight's one of the news items points out. Anybody with any sense does not do interviews, and it doesn't require a reporter. If somebody asks you any question, you're doing an interview. I don't know who the hell you think you are. Well, yeah, I do. You think you can think. Anybody who will answer a question, forget winning any humility award. Forget trying to go into competition with me. If you'll answer a question, then whoever the muses are in charge of humility, or the correct synonym, of course, is minimal intelligence. I'm sure one of those little muses dies. Just something to think about. The question should not be, but notice you will answer it. Anyone will. That somebody can say, well, I just heard you speak, or I just heard that piece of music you played. I just heard that poem you read. I got to ask you, though, what's it about? And the person will answer. The person asking, what's it about, it's the wrong question. It's the wrong direction. If you had any sense, you would not be playing the game. Of course, those of you that know what I'm doing, all this goes on in your head anyway. That's what we're talking about. But you would not respond to a question. The question should not even be. Rather than talk about fictitious third parties, look at it your way. You see something in life that for whatever reasons catches your attention. And it entertains you, it attracts you for a period of time, but then later you wonder. You even say to yourself, what's it about? If you can't get hold of someone who seemed to have more knowledge of it than you did, if you heard a speech or whatever it was, or saw a painting, and you wanted to later ask somebody, what's it about? You're going at it in entirely, if it's possible, entirely the wrong way. You shouldn't be asking somebody, what's it about? If there is a question about what's it about, it should be aimed towards you, but the what's it about is, why am I staying here looking at this? I don't mean that as a sarcastic put down of painting, or why am I sitting here listening to this music, because you may indeed find it enjoyable. If you didn't, you probably wouldn't even ask yourself, what's it about? Well, you can, but then it's in an aggressive way, like, you call this art? That kind of thing. But then you know what it's about. As far as you're concerned, it's about a fraud. But why, if you're going to do anything with life, is not to ask somebody else, what's this about? But it seems oh so apropos. If the person has if you're asking about something specific, such as a play, an idea, it doesn't have to be anything as complex as a play or something. It can just be an idea. And somebody expresses an idea, and you go, that's almost interesting, but a little strange. I mean, what's it about? You're asking them, what's the point? What are you actually trying to say? If you're interested in whatever it is, you should not be asking someone else, even if they appear to be the author of it, if they appear to be the source of it. You're missing the whole thing about the mind, which would be great if you could actually miss the whole thing. That was a figure of speech. You're missing the parts of the mind that we can talk about to some potential profit. As you should not be asking someone, what's this about? You should be asking yourself, what am I about that I am interested in this? What am I about that I sit here and watch this, listen to this, read this? What am I about? But of course, you know the answer to all that, so that's child's play, all you people who've been watching, so we'll move on to something more adult. The real question is, why do people think that life is about something? What is it that they believe life is about? Yeah, I know you want an example. Why are people religious? It has been common throughout thousands of years for social commentators and so-called thinkers out in the street to pass for such, or who do pass for such, to commonly identify man as being unique on the basis of his spirituality. That no matter where you look, throughout the history of man, to the most remote jungles to downtown metropolitan sophisticated areas today, you always find people engaged in some form of religion. What's the point of religion? What's it about? Some commentators, I forget commentators, let me point it out. If you looked at it a certain way, this is done from within the mass of humanity themselves. This comment does arise, but I'm going to stretch it so I'll take responsibility for pointing out to start with, is that it has been noted by people at the front of life's evolutionary parade, people in the metropolitan, sophisticated, educated areas of the world right now and 5,000 years ago. It has been not uncommon for someone in that milieu to point to the rear of the parade, to those in their same area or some other area on the planet who are less developed, less educated, and point out that that is where religion has its strongest hold. That superstitious people, people with very little exposure to the outside world, just people who are not quite up to the evolutionary speed of life's mass parade. But if that be true, which you can stand there and argue, that's easy to do, and to say that they are the most religious. But then it should be, and that seems, I'm not going to stop and do it, but I assume that your own mind, if you don't argue with that, you know that that appears to be quite valid at its own level, a quite valid observation. And it seems true right now. You can look around, that in the heart or in any metropolitan area, in a place that is the zenith of sophistication and technological evolution, etc., there will be neighborhoods, there will be trailer parks, there will be whole areas where people are very religious, more so than those that apparently with their hands on the levers of power. And from one view, you can say that, and everything fits, that the less educated they are, the poorer they are, the less experience they have in life, the more religious they are. And then usually steps in a sociologist or something of that ilk will say, and it also fits because they look around and realize that they are not in the avant-garde, that they are not amongst the rich, they are not amongst those in power, and therefore they search for gods, for some imaginary possibility of additional power. That these sorts of people commonly are praying for more money, for power, for a better job, revenge on their enemies. And so from one view, they're in the midst of some fictitious metropolitan, contemporarily sophisticated area, someone can point to that group and say, well, now there is religion at its strongest amongst those people, and I have explained part of the reason why, or maybe all the reason why, they would say. But if that be true, which it sounds all right, and as I said, it all fits. Of course, you people are supposed to know in the mind, every damn thing fits. I don't know how people ever got off on the idea that, well, that's logical. Can I write that down? You know, now that you point that out, that does explain that. Look, can I write this down? Better yet, you want to get somewhere, take that pen and stab it into your damn heart, you idiot. Well, I don't think I'll write that down. Well, I thought you wouldn't. Well, what was that other part? I'll get back to it in a minute. And everybody wonders. Here's what gets me, is there's still people who believe that Lewis Carroll was in that plane with Amelia. And those that don't believe that think she was with Wiley Post. And will never return. Don't you wave your wonderland at me. If there was real validity, if there was an explanation of life on the basis that we're talking about religion as an example, of those who are the least educated, the least intelligent, well, everybody on this planet, of course, nowadays, if you're a human, by very, very definition, you think. But in one sense, you can say that people think, well, lower parts, older parts of their brain, and they're those who, just generally speaking, it's not absolutely cut and dry, but there are people who think in the higher regions. those known as the New England, no, not New England, it's the cerebral cortex. I knew that. Boston. And the more temperate zones, where people have time to think. Instead of laying on the beach and eating and fooling around. If, back where we were, if there was some sort of explanation, if something conclusive was being said or observed, that the less educated, the less that people, some group of people or an individual is oriented and being directed by a higher part, a newer part of the brain, then the more he is inclined to be. And the world is full of statistical evidence, observable evidence. The more inclined he is to be religious. If that would be true, then on a graduated scale, the more you got into the other end, into educated, sophisticated, worldly wise people who were using, more so than the first group, the higher, newer areas, then they would not be religious at all. And if you're a real smart ass, you might jump in and say, aha, we got you because they're not that religious. When you get to that area, about the best, about the lowest you would stoop maybe is to be an Episcopalian. No. Are you a Christian? No, I'm an Episcopalian. Are you religious? No. Church of England. At any rate, at first those of you that are interested in such humorous matters might say, well, you backed into it because when you get into the more intellectual realms, people are less prone to be religious, at least in some serious sense. There's no comparison between the kinds of religious activity the world leaders, the kings, the princes, the titans of industry and power, they do not end up in Assembly of God tents on Sunday. That is far removed is what I meant, the comparison between in the United States, a Southern Baptist church or a Church of God or that kind of thing, and the Episcopal Church. And you could say, well, it's not even a religion, just barely a religion, it's just a social organization. You say that, and you say, well, they're not religious. Oh, yes, they are. They have just taken it somewhere else. They call it other things. Well, it's no big secret. What they normally think of it as being science. But all of this is bullshit. God and science, looking for an answer to life is one thing. Well, let's go back to religion, because more people seem interested in religion than science. It seems to require less effort to think about it. So I don't care. I'll do it either way. But they're both the same thing. What the mind does not recognize is that through people asking, back where we started, what's this about? They're asking life, what's this about? And when they come up with the idea of God, of some extra systemic force, or when they lay their trust in science, they're doing the same thing without knowing it. Aren't you going to ask me what's taking place? All right, I'll tell you. It is the mind attempting to see itself, and it depicts itself outside of itself. That is all it is. At the most credit, it's not any credit, but the closest you can describe the idea of there being guides, or the idea that science, in the full sense of the word, that science is leading in the same sense that people believe that, or claim to believe that a trust in God, being religious, will eventually lead to, of course they say things like salvation or eternal life. But it's just another way of science is going to lead to the truth. Science will lead to the ultimate explanation of this universe, the physical universe. We're not interested in all that religious mumbo jumbo. We want facts, by God. What? Facts. It is all one thing. And if you don't like those extremes as they're set up, not by me, but by common thought, that religion is on one hand, and then science is on the other. If those extremes are too extreme for you, which some people do have that problem with extremes, look in the middle. What would you like there? Anything you like, put it there. If it does not have to do with immediate physical comfort, physical pleasure, then it is the mind attempting to perceive itself. It's the mind asking, what the hell is this? Who the hell am I? Now this is put in all sorts of context, and I'm not going to try and run through some other extensive history of man, but this is philosophy. This is the idea of God. It's sociology, it's psychology, it's philosophy, it's physics, it's drama, it's music, it's dance. It is all one thing. Now you can call it other things for a specific reason. And we all know that it's explained, and not the way I'm explaining it, that those interested in art describe art as being for X purpose. Those interested more in music than art will describe music as being for X purpose, and perhaps art, X over 2. From the view of those interested, they will have their own explanation for the purpose of whatever it is. The religious, of course, explain religion quite validly from their view, and if you listen to it, you go, yeah, I can't. If what you say you believe, and if what you say, if that's the mathematics of your science, then by God, 2 and 2 is 4, or what you say, 2 and 2 equals God. But then if you turn around and you talk to a physicist, a mathematician, you get the same thing. That if you listen to their story, so if they're interested in it, their explanation is not what I'm saying. I'm just pointing out that we're aware, and you shouldn't trip on it, because any explanation that a reasonable dancer can give for dance, if you read it and you're not prejudiced against dance to start with, and you just read some dancer's description of the purpose of dance, what it serves to help enlighten men, to broaden their horizons, their appreciation of one another, and to help bring on world peace and to lower cabbage prices. And if you listen to it and you got no ingrained bias against it, it makes sense. You got no reason to complain. But by the same token, you can listen to the most exotic to you religious idea, or the most far removed from logic, most recent theory in subatomic physics. And if somebody will put it in some little way, then come up with a metaphor, do something other than mathematics and describe it for you, if you listen to them, to their presentation, it will make sense in that context. That is why they cannot find Lewis Carroll in the plane. Because even if they find Amelia's plane, they won't find him. Inside, or you can go out another way, for those of you that suddenly look more dazed than usual. If they do find Amelia's plane, he will be in it. You can look at it that way. So, well, I don't like to see disgruntled audience members. If you don't like one way, I'll change it the other way. Same thing. The question is what I'm trying to get to you to look at is nothing specific, not about what I'm talking about. I just use that to start with. This is no more important than anything else. But for humans, your mind and everyone else's mind is continually, the more you're driven by the newer, higher areas of the mind, the more you have some question. Or when you hear questions about, what is this? What is life? At least it grabs your attention for a second. If someone says there's only one important question in life, and you think, when they're going to cut the tax on beer? And they go, no, it's what is this? What's the purpose of being here? And if you're not haven't been indulging too strongly in the brewer's art, you hear someone say, no, the question is not having to do with alcohol tax. It's having to do with what is this? What's the purpose of life? And ordinary sane minds will go, that's true, that's true. Even if they never think about it until they hear it again. Everything they're doing, which by the way, is, I pointed out before, but drinking is the same thing. Drinking, drugs, it's all an attempt for the mind to look at itself, to perceive itself. It's easy to make fun of that because in one sense it would appear that you're going about it backwards. But in one way it's almost the mind trying to, without knowing what it's doing. It's trying to fool itself Like it's like a butterfly trying to catch itself and pin itself down on a piece of paper before it realizes what happens.
Yeah.
And if it drinks, it might fly slower. Huh? I assume you get it. That's the butterfly not realizing, wait a minute. If I'm flying slower, then I'm moving slower. It's all going to even out. Just because I'm flying slower, so I'm still trying to pin myself down. Anyway, that's the way it goes. That's why, sad to say, for you beer lovers and drinkers and dope addicts, that as good as the idea seems, the horse is on the merry-go-round. If you slow down the merry-go-round, the horses slow down. Don't you get it? It's Lewis Carroll.
Yeah.
It's the mind. It's, I believe God's talking to me. Really? Yes, I do. Well, I'm proud of you. At least it shows your brain's still working. Oh, yes. No, I said God's talking. Oh, I'm sorry. It is all the mind attempting to perceive itself. And the easiest way to look at it, that I know to describe on the spur of the moment, is since it cannot look directly at itself, then what it does is conjure up images outside of itself, notions and ideas outside of itself, but it's still the attempt to see itself. So the ideas, say, of God or of science, of the truth. I keep saying science. I know that some people, you're not used to taking science as being synonymous with God. But look at science's avowed purpose, to discover the truth, or to reveal finally a true objective picture of reality. Call it anything you want to. As opposed to, as scientific minds would have it, as opposed to subjective ideas of God, which explain nothing. Both of them are the same thing. Everything the mind does, unless it is immediately involved in some physical, pleasurable activity, something having to do with survival, that right then you're hungry and you don't see anything to eat, and you turn to your husband or wife or somebody and you go, "You got anything? Is there anything here to eat that I didn't find?" Other than that, or the mind looking for something in a drawer, some food, the back of the ass box. Other than that, anything else the mind is doing, it can be very slow, be very dull, or it can be more active and obvious to observation. But anything else the mind does is the attempt for it to perceive itself. People do not write symphonies. People do not write plays to see them performed. It is the mind trying to see itself. There is no such thing as a God as everybody imagines, and everybody knows it. I mean, people who really believe they're sincere, you know that they will play out their part of getting upset if somebody gets their attention and suddenly says, "There's no God," and they want to argue it. Everybody knows there's no God. And it's not everybody knows, because your body got no concept of God. So I should be more truthful. Every mind knows that there is no God. Every mind knows that there is no such thing as science. Every mind knows there is no such thing as truth. The body knows what truth is. The body knows what God is, reality. It is the mind that makes it all up for one reason, not stupidity, not ignorance, not because you don't have enough education, this group or this group has too much. It is the mind simply changing the stakes of the game, changing the materials it has at its individual disposal. It is the mind attempting to perceive itself. When it's saying, "What's the purpose of life?" the mind is saying, "What the hell am I?" But notice, people do not do that commonly, to say the very least. You almost have to have someone direct you to do it, and then the question is, well, how did they ever come up with it? Which I'm not going to get into. All right, I don't know. We'll get into it. But notice, people do not come up, or look at yourself. You do not. You may have been studying science. You may have gone through religions. You may have gone through studying psychology. You may have gone through studying mysticism, attempts to change one's state of consciousness. And in all that time, check for yourself. Did you ever phrase it? Not that you may not have said these words, but at one time did it suddenly strike you like a momentary, a small level moment of enlightenment experience at least, that you went, wait a minute. All of this is one thing. I'm not seeking God. I'm not trying to be enlightened. I'm not trying to wake up. I'm not trying to have a mystical experience. I'm not trying to understand human nature. I'm not trying to understand the material basis of the universe. There's one thing going on in me. It is the operations of my brain that we call the mind, which is the noise of the brain, words. It's this thing trying to see itself. It's this thing. It's not asking, what's the nature of life? What's the limits of the universe? What's the motivations for human behavior? What brings groups of people together? That's all a smokescreen. That's the camouflage. In tonight's news item, talk is simply the attempt to camouflage bullshit. That is thought. Now, all of this, it does not strike people, but this is what it is. It is the mind, your mind. You got nowhere else to look. Nobody else's means anything. It is your mind attempting to look at itself, and all you got to do is try, and you know that this is much easier said than done. So much for sarcasm, even though it was well aimed. It seems not possible. The mind then looks externally and imagines things. It imagines the truth. That's what I need. I'm over being superstitious, my childish days of believing in God and all that. But what I'm looking for now is an objective understanding, a direct perception into the heart and the essence of things as they are. Of course, then the question is, what is stopping you? Well, I should have said that is the dirty question. But it does not strike people what they're doing. It is the mind, and this is it. I'm putting it to you as simple as I know how in English words. It is the mind attempting to perceive itself. And since you right now, if you try to look at your mind, it apparently is impossible. You try to look at it, and then you're what you're trying to look at. And then you stop a minute and you go, oh, I was trying, and then you're back trying again, and then you become what you're looking at, or what you were trying to look at. Or another sensation is you try to look at it and you go, where'd it go? Now it's all me trying to look at it. Which, of course, if we lived in a better world, that alone, blah, blah, blah. But there you are, and it's like, well, I'm trying to study something, and where'd it go? It's as though everyone goes through, not literally, but it's as though everyone goes through in the early days of trying to do that. When you first become conscious, when you first become verbal and literate as a kid, and then after that, you begin to look externally. You look outside. Simply put, God's the easiest one. It doesn't matter what God, it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter what religion. Everybody that talks about gods, spirits of any kind, it is that person's mind trying to describe what's going on in their head, in their mind, and they're describing it and attributing it somewhere else. And what they're trying to do is perceive their own mind, not their body. They're trying to perceive their mind, and the mind cannot directly, apparently, at least in no easy task, cannot directly perceive itself, and that's where all of this comes from. And not just religion, but it's just the easiest example. That's all it is. And you see it, and it's just obvious as hell. What is not obvious after that is that everything, even though some people can see such as that, especially if they've already been wired up and feel fairly anti-religious anyway. They say they can see it, but all they do is think, well, boy, somebody gave religion a kick. It is easier to see in some great example like that, whether it be that or it could be science. If you're anti-science, if you're a Luddite, I could get you a degree perhaps, or say, yeah, you're right. But what you can't see is that every damn thing that you do that is not directly survival based, pleasurably, is not some physical pleasurable activity, then everything your mind is doing, did you say everything, is the mind attempting to perceive itself. But then the question is, if you begin to see that, is, you know, what kind of dunderhead am I if I keep doing that, and I keep doing it the same ways over and over and over and over, and I've been doing it this way for 20, 30, 40 years, and I have not had even a scintilla, a soupçon of anything even resembling, not just success, but success's third cousin. I've made no progress whatsoever. Why do I keep doing it? When skates are old, they make noise. When rivers flow, they gurgle. As long as you're alive, your brain is going to make noise. I'll give you a new, this sounds like a good rule. The brain, since it can think, will think. I'm not going to ask people here in the studio who chuckled and like, that comes as a surprise, does it, sir, madam? Don't make yourself feel bad. Since the brain can make noise, since the brain can think, it will think. But the question should be to yourself, not just, what's going on here? What's the purpose of life? Or, as I said, I refer back one more time, you should be way past, or the point of me spending this time tonight, is looking at anything specific, a local example, be it religion, philosophy, me, anybody, a book, anything. For you to look out and to think, what's the purpose of this? Did I enjoy it or I'm attracted to it? Why do I study this? Why do I like this? That is the wrong question. The question would be a little bit better if you did not look at a localized example, if you did not look at a specific example. If it were, and even verbally, the extreme example, the better example, by the way, is not what's the purpose of life. That would seem to be at least outside the realm of the limitations of a localized example. But that's still not it. It should be, what's up? Why am I wanting to find a purpose in life? The answer is there. People say, let me speed it up and see if I can narrow it down, focus it. The world's full of people, the kind of people that would probably listen to such as this, that believe that they want to know the purpose of life. That whatever they describe, they will generally buy into that description. Like, well, all of this is the attempt to awaken, to change your state of consciousness. Everything along those lines is the desire. You ready? By God, the real desire to understand, discover the meaning of life. And they go, yeah. All I can do is, I'm going to end it with a rhetorical kind of hint again. If that be true, and you're at least wise enough by now to know that it is not done physically, that no amount of fasting, eating, praying, lighting candles, dancing, kneeling, there's no physical activity. There's nothing you can do to the body that will reveal the purpose of life. Because I can't resist pointing this out. If you had any sense, if any of us could get free long before now of one of the houses in which you've lived that seems to bring joy sometime, then the whole question would be moot. Into parentheses. If you accept the fact that the highest possible aim for a person, even if you believe that that would be true of yourself, that you want to know the meaning of life, you should just turn right quick and look at you. Don't look anywhere else. None of the books you read, nowhere you've been. Just look at what's been going on in your mind, because it is your mind that wants to know the meaning of life. Your body has no such question. Your stomach, your sex organs, your muscles, no part of your strictly physical, non-verbal body has ever even grunted, tried to make sign, and tried to sign you the message up to your brain like, hey, we want to know the meaning of life down here too. It's only here. And if you, so to speak, generically speaking, if you had any sense, if anybody had any sense that say they want to know the meaning of life, they would turn very quickly, as fast as you could. And if you look directly at it, you try long enough, I'm just sure, if you really want to, you'll see it. That you look and you realize that kind of thinking and everything else has been going on now. Let's say you're 30 years old, okay? It's been on how long? 30 years. Well, minus a couple. It's been going on like that. Have you made any progress? Is anything any clearer? And the answer is no. That offers no hint whatsoever that the only thing known in this universe, the only thing that any human has ever recognized in this whole universe that wants to know the meaning of life is their mind, that individual person. Other people can agree, and all you got is their word for it. All you know is that you want to know the meaning of life, and it's up here. It's not down here, it's not here, and it's not here. It's here. It's only here. If you don't have this, you don't know the meaning of life. You don't care. It's only here. Then you try to turn, and if you keep trying to look and think, well, I have been wanting to know, and I have been thinking nonstop for at least, to the best of my, if I'm 30 years old, I've been doing it for 28 years, according to how slow you are to get going. But I've at least been thinking nonstop, day and night, for 28 years, and I still am asking, what's the meaning of life? And the thing asking it has not moved. It's not gone forward, it's not gone backward, it's not gone sideways. Nothing has changed. And you can say, yes, but I still want to know. I'm not going to give up by God. I'm the kind of guy that sticks to things. Which in ordinary life I know gets passed off as being a man of fortitude, determination. But how about this? Rather than look at it in a positive view, just between you and me, a man who keeps doing something and not one thing changes, rather than smiling and being proud of it, to say, well, I'm the kind of guy that sticks to it. How about we could put it more, I submit to you, more precisely. Instead of saying, I'm the kind of guy that sticks to things, you could say, oh, no, I'm the kind of guy that's, I'm just dumb as hell. Thank God the tape ran out, right?